Meckman, and what she had to say at that meeting was it what she does is to help women who are pregnant, and so she falls under our women and children, and she helps their mental abilities. So that falls under our wellness, mental wellness that we're stressing this week. So Cynthia, take it away.
Thank you so much. This is my first time doing one of these kinds of groups, and I'm really, really grateful. And you guys are so friendly already, so it makes it a little bit easier because I am very, public speaking is my nemesis. So, so I'll be sweating a little bit and all that kind of stuff. But,
we won't make you stand up.
Yeah, none of that.
You're fine.
Thank you. So I'll be dancing around because I can't sit still. So yes, so I am the director and founder of Mind Body Baby. And I guess usually how we try to start this is because pregnancy, and especially the postpartum period, is kind of like, well, we get to know when someone's having a baby, right? But after that baby comes, parents kind of fall under the radar. But it's really important to know that the most common complication of bringing a human into the world is a mental health disorder. Over any physical complication, it's a mental health disorder. And it's, so 1 in 7 individuals prior to COVID having a baby is likely to experience a mental health disorder, specifically because they had baby, not because they previously had anxiety or depression or OCD or anything like that, but brought on by it. And then it's 1 in 3 births are considered traumatic. And maternal mortality, which is of course loss of a life anywhere between pregnancy and the first year postpartum, is in crisis mode. We are 2 to 3 times higher than any other wealthy nation. And it's jumped up 58% since 1990. So advancements in medicine has not kept us safer. Now COVID hit, and that, as we know, just in general, really did a doozy on everyone's mental health. And it made things infinitely worse for mothers and birthing people. And I do need to say that 1 in 10 partners and fathers also have a mood disorder from bringing a human into the world. And then because of COVID or post-COVID, that number jumped from 1 in 7 birthing people to 1 in 5. Women of color are hit infinitely worse. It's 1 in 3. And so, and the number 1 cause of death in that period, the pregnancy through postpartum, is actually suicide. In fact, CNN just did a big article on it yesterday. The reasons that we have this is an issue in our country, it's complex, multi-layered, and really baked into our traditional medical care. But if we can get into a lot of that, there's a lot of policy work and a lot of systemic work that needs to be done. However, Mind Body Baby is an organization that is on the ground, boots on the ground, working with individual people who are struggling with a perinatal mood disorder. That's what we call the mental health mood disorder is called a perinatal mood disorder, and I'll refer to it as a PMAD, just for short to keep it clean. But it includes, you've probably heard postpartum depression, but it's also postpartum anxiety, postpartum rage, postpartum OCD, postpartum bipolar, and of course, in some rare cases, psychosis. And that's usually where the only time you see it in the news is when there's been a tragedy from someone who has struggled with psychosis and there's been an action taken. You can hit my first button. So Mind Body Baby is, we were formed to kind of become a conduit or a connector. So we have several parents here, right? Who's a parent in the room? Okay, so when you bring that baby, especially that first baby home, there is suddenly a whole bunch of things you didn't know you didn't know. And no matter how hard you think, you've read some books, you've watched a lot of things, everybody talks about stuff, you get saturated. When you become pregnant, the reality of what your baby needs can be, night and day. I had no plan that I was going to have a NICU baby. So guess what? I did not know how to figure out what my options were when my babies had to go to NICU. So my body baby make it simpler to find the information you need, and especially when you are dealing with a mood disorder. The top 4 reasons people that struggle often don't get help, and upwards of 70% of people don't get care for their mental health disorder. One is access. We all know mental health care is very expensive and not necessarily accessible if you don't have transportation, if you don't have childcare. That's one of the benefits post-COVID is that there's more telehealth, but it's still, that doesn't necessarily cut it because it can be very difficult to do therapy with your baby or your children right there. The other is not understanding what it really is. Depression, anxiety, OCD, and rage present differently when you are in that perinatal period because you're also dealing with so many other changes immediately. You're also sleep deprived. You're being the most selfless you'll ever be in your life, giving your whole body to keeping this other little person alive, at least for a certain amount of time. And depending on what your environment is, what kind of support you have, that dictates quite a lot. There's access, understanding what's wrong, of course, shame and stigma. Mental health, it's a little bit different with every culture, every class set, but there is a large stigma around mental health. Even more so is when you have brought a human into the world, the fact that you're struggling, I guarantee you 90% of the people struggling interpret it as they're not getting it right. They're doing something wrong, they're not equipped enough, they're not adequate. That guilt adds to it. And so that is a big issue right there. So asking for help can be really hard because it's kind of saying, I don't know what's wrong and I don't know how to help myself or my child. And then the last one is fear of repercussions. It's a very real concern, and this is another one that makes it harder for birthing people of color, is that to admit that you need some help can sometimes trigger, and this is where there's a lot of bias in our medical system, can trigger inquiries. Instead of automatically helping us access help and care, there's an assumption that maybe they're not able to take care of the baby. When the biggest courage, I mean, it's an immense amount of courage to ask for help, and we should be really making sure they feel very proud for standing up and doing that. And another important thing to understand is that our medical care system actually are not trained at all in maternal mental health. Doctors are not, OBs, pediatricians, nurses, they don't have to take a training at all to understand that. Even though this is the most common complication of having a baby, they don't have to be trained. Even honestly, even our psychologists, all our master's psychology programs don't have a class in maternal mental health. So the only way to get certified in that is a separate training after you've done everything else. So there's also a very large shortage of skilled practitioners that understand the complications of this period. The only obligation our doctors have is a screening, but that screening is largely just for depression. They don't really touch anxiety, rage, OCD, and so on. So there's a lot of people falling through cracks. The mood disorders, while there are certain race and class that get hit hardest, it does not discriminate socioeconomically. I mean, your education, your access to care, financial access to care does not keep you safer from struggling with a mood disorder. So our organization was, again, built to make it easier for people that are struggling to find the help they need. And that looks different based on where they are in their journey and what they actually need. Our work is steeped in lived experience. It's both a combination of perinatal practitioners that are founders, and then also lots of personal lived experience in all the different ways it can look, between trauma, early birth, mood disorders, all the things that can really complicate coming home with a child and being well enough to be all that they need. Let's step forward, because then, of course, like always, going all over the place. So this is some of our early numbers. These are pre-COVID. 30% will have a traumatic birth. 1 in 4 will experience loss, and that's anything from miscarriage to stillbirth to for medical reasons. And then since the pandemic, it jumped up to 1 in 5. It is important to know, so when I was connecting mental health and mortality, it is intertwined because suicide is the largest cause. But what's important to know is that it's 80% of deaths are considered preventable. That's both the mental health and the physical outcomes. And there are a lot of reasons for that. Again, bias is a big one, and listening to individuals not fully understanding their birth rights. And so there's a lot of complications. One of our primary actions is education. So that's anywhere we can do that education prenatally, we try to. And that is understanding your birth rights, understanding where you have the power to say no. Make sure you understand what your options are. Lots of times, we have to remember that our medical system, and I don't want to poo-poo them because there's a necessity, but birthing is actually a physiological experience. It is not automatically a medical experience, but we've made it into a strictly medical experience. And so we don't even know that except for maybe the last 150 years, there weren't doctors around. We had midwives, we had community, workers that were helping people birth. And of course, it was a lot more risky. There was more, we didn't have the hygiene that we have now, but it happened humans have been around, mammals have been around for millennia, and we seem to proliferate. So there's aspects of this that don't have to be medical. And when you bring the for-profit medical piece into it, there's always going to be some conflict as to what's really necessary and what's not. And I should have brought this up earlier. I will use the word perinatal a lot, and we use that word. There's a lot of terms in this whole cycle, but it is that conception to about a year or 2 postpartum. So when we track mood disorders and physical disorders and deaths, we are talking about all the way to that first year postpartum, because it's not automatic that so say you get through pregnancy well and you have your baby, that it's automatically your mood disorder starts the minute you have your baby. It can happen 6 months in. For me, it happened when I weaned. There are a lot of factors that influence it, and just because when it starts, it's not necessarily always clear, again, because you're dealing with so many other things at the same time. So everything we do is focused on combating those obstacles. Education is the first one. So we have, our website is actually a resource website. Within that, we have a bunch of practitioners locally that have specialized perinatal training that aren't necessarily your OBs and stuff like that. This is all the complementary stuff that you won't get in your traditional medical care, but that almost everyone needs, whether it's feeding support, sleep support, infant development education, early learning styles, cultural practices, so you can feel more connected to your history and bringing that into raising your baby. And then we also have a whole library of short, easily consumable videos talking about the most common issues families share with us and are asking questions. So we call it our top 5 things video education library. Right now we have 50. We're working on some grants to be able to do some more because they're endless. But we partner with practitioners in the community, and they help us educate people. So it can be, again, like it's someone who's just bringing baby home and they need to start doing tummy time, but their baby hates it lying on their belly, and all they know is that's how you do it. We have a video that shows you all the different ways you can do it and get that tummy time in and make it easier to get that part done because it's so important in the development of walking and future movement. The same thing with feeding. We've broken feeding down into a whole bunch of different topics. We have many more. If there's pain this way, here are 5 things that you can start looking at. Here's language if you need to ask for more help, through your doctor's office. That is a big issue. You could be talking about what you're seeing, but your doctor might not always be comprehending the way you're communicating. And so language is really, really invaluable. We also connect to a ton of other local organizations, nonprofits, the Diaper Bank. Lots of organizations here that are here to help you through different chunks of it. None of us can do all of it for a family. So again, the easier we're able to get you connected, we're able to reduce some anxieties and help you deal with what you're dealing with, gain some parenting confidence, and move through to the next thing you have to worry about. So that's our resource website, and then we have a whole network of support groups, perinatal support groups. They're all peer-driven, but they're also facilitated by experts in the field. So whether some are therapeutically driven with maternal mental health training, some are driven by like doulas and postpartum doulas that we've also added mental health training to, so that I'm not even going. I've gotten off track. We'll just get support groups. So every month we automatically host 10. These are always free of cost of judgment. Everything we do is about access, dignified access, humble care, and no cost to the individual. Because you'd be surprised when you're in the thick of it, and maybe some of you might remember, but more than ever is bringing a human into the world is very commodifying. Everything costs money. And we're not just talking about your basic care, we're talking about just all the things to bring comfort to your situation cost money. So sometimes doing things like taking care of yourself, doing something that is actually gonna help you get better, it goes way down. Birth is way more expensive than it's ever been, as is everything in life. We know how expensive childcare is. It's as much as sending your kid to college these days, and it's only getting worse. So it's very important that cost not be in the way. So we have general postpartum groups, we have infertility groups, birth trauma, and then we have several that are specific to just kind of troubleshooting. So like the first Thursday of every month is our feeding group. So you don't have to, it's not about coming to learn, you get to actually talk with a very veteran IBCLC and come in and talk about your situation and get some ideas and some language you maybe didn't have before. And then if you're at wit's end, they're gonna be also more connected to their specialty, like how to get more help in their specialty, especially when you get into things like tongue ties and the complications of development around feeding. The second Thursday is sleep, same thing. You get to come with your issue and just get some more ideas. Talk with other people and just realize you're also not the only one struggling with your kids sleeping. It's not you failing, it's just that hard. And sometimes that message alone goes a long way to realize you're not alone and it is just that hard. So yeah, now I've totally lost where it was. I'm so sorry. So I also, no, it's actually not your fault, it's totally my fault. So one in 10 partners and fathers also struggle with a mood disorder. Now that certainly is more common when the birthing person has an issue, but this is even true with adoptive parents, and probably even, I don't have the exact numbers, but probably even higher when you're dealing with foster parents and guardians. So when we start thinking about the fact that childhood or infant abuse and neglect all skyrocket in that first year postpartum. Divorces skyrocket in that first year postpartum. When we know that things like OCD, rage, anxiety brings on this very commonly this thing called invasive thoughts. We call tornado thoughts, where your mind, your anxiety is taking you to these worst case scenario, and it's running through your brain. It's running through your brain, and you almost feel like you're going crazy. And some of the thoughts get incredibly scary. There's no intention in your mind that you'd act on them, but just the fact that they're in there becomes, again, a big source of guilt and shame, and it gets hard to ask for help. But a lot of people don't know that that is actually a common thing. So when you're in it, you don't know that this is anxiety I'm feeling. This is, you feel like you're going crazy. And you're also not sleeping super great, so you're blaming it on that, but then you can't get a whole lot of sleep because of the situation you're in. And you're in this cycle, and then building up on that and everything that it does to the family relationship, to the connection with your baby. We know infants now that, of course, this is even in utero, but through that first year postpartum, the infant is borrowing the parent's brain or their nervous system through their tone of voice, through their breath, through their heart rate, to help them regulate. And it's the practice of using that practice over and over again, that their system is learning and building their own regulation. So if that baby does not have access to the calming of the parent, and that doesn't mean they don't have stress, but what's really good is if the baby can actually witness the stress, and then also witness the coming down to calm, coming back to calm, that's teaching that baby cycle of stress regulation. But they need that. And if you've got a person dealing with postpartum depression that makes them feel tend to withdraw from baby, or if you've got mom that's dealing with anxiety and she's in fight or flight all the time, that's what baby's working with. And so in this first year is foundational to things like learning potential, attachment, how we have later relationships and resilience. It's not all of it, but it is the foundation. It is what your house is built on. Is it sand or is it a nice heavy concrete slab that's reinforced, you know? So we are coming from the place that we need to take care of the parents so they can be what they need to take care of the baby. But it's everyone here that's been a parent, especially the birthing person, knows that once that baby comes out, we kind of become invisible. And mental health has not been a concern for a long time. It is now getting some acknowledgement, but we are so far in right now, and there are so many other things going on in the world too that are exacerbating it. We are coming in to a crisis, and we're seeing it on the ground. We every year we serve several hundred mothers in our support groups. We get about 1,200 visits to our resource website every month. They're all local, you know, in that young family range. And then our third pillar or focus is the direct care. So like if you are in a place where you know you need help and you can't access it, you can't afford it, you're either like, maybe you're on Medicaid and the waits are like 4 months long, which has been a very real issue. Or you have regular insurance and your deductible is way too high because you've had a baby and you've got medical bills, and then that's just, that care for yourself seems like, okay, that's just something we can't do right now. It can be you're not insured enough, you don't have decent access. We can, number one, step in. We step in and provide some casework in that we try to do some of the legwork. It's very hard to find therapists right now. So many have had to go private because insurance pays so poorly. So trying to find something within their insurance takes time. And you have to make a lot of phone calls. And when you're also struggling mentally and you're taking care of a baby, it's really hard to stay on top of that. So we'll do the legwork. We try to find a solution within their insurance means. But if we can't do that, then we will step in and cover the cost for at least the beginning 8. And then we will also try and help them find if feeding issues and sleep issues and other issues are part of the problem, we'll help them get some information on that too. trying to be this like navigator, take a little bit off their plate and just the reminder that, you know, yeah, this is really hard work and you deserve support. We really are meant to do this in the village. We luckily this year got a grant from Mecklenburg County and we're able to take that program is like our community care fund, and we've added a pilot project that's actually our first effort and the only effort in the community to do preventative work. And it's called our community doula program. So we are focusing on Black mothers in the community that are under-resourced because they are the hardest hit. And they come to us in their second trimester. We connect them with our case manager or navigator, and then also a community doula, someone who's already working in the community. They get extra, they get prenatal care, they get labor and birthing care, they get postpartum care with their, you know, in conjunction with their medical provider, because doulas are not medical providers. And then the caseworkers is helping them through the other hardships that they're dealing with. If they're dealing with food insecurity, housing insecurity, other issues, they've got other kids that maybe have a developmental issue that they need help figuring out. And then of course we do extra screenings and connect them to mental health care before it becomes a bigger problem. And then within that, we also do monthly support groups so that they are building a peer village to realize they're not the only one that it's that hard with, and that they are hopefully creating connections that they can continue on with babies all of similar ages and stuff. And then within that, we're doing tons of education. So it's a prenatal education and then postpartum education, infant development education. So the support groups are our resource library and this community care fund. And those are our fundamental programs. But we are also the only organization doing anything like this in our community at all. There's really not a lot of places to turn because there's so many people that fall through the cracks of that middle way because costs are just so expensive. So I don't know. So I didn't come up with a great ending, but so yeah. So actually, with that, so again, the way we look at it, we are very fortunate. We've been able to make a beautiful impact so far. It is a quiet one though, because we don't take a lot of pictures. We've got people in our support groups that are, you know, in the thick of things. They're coming with, you know, milk stains on their shirts and they're tired. We don't want them to have to feel like they have to put energy in. So I'm not gonna like take a bunch of pictures so that I can sell them. And so we don't get to show a lot of stuff, but we have a lot of people tell us what kind of impact it had. You can kind of continue through that. And so many have come back to volunteer. So many are actually, we're trying to work on building like a mom mentoring program. So like if you've got a very specific experience, or perhaps you've experienced a certain kind of birth trauma, and after you've been able to kind of work through it some yourself, that you can turn around and come back and help. Just be a listening ear for a mom that's going through something similar. You've been in the NICU, you get to work through some of your stuff, and you come back and you be a listening ear. There's so many that want to come back and do that. We're helping first-time moms, second-time moms, third-time moms. There is no, like if you got through your first pregnancy, you know, easy schmeezy and didn't have any struggles, that is no guarantee. In fact, one of our founders just had her third and had her first perinatal disorder, and it was severe, and it was in her pregnancy, and it was she needed care right away because it came on fast and it was very severe. But she also had the knowledge that to be able to see it for what it was. I'm trying to think what else I can share.
I bet we have questions.
Yeah, please. Please. Better.
And my question is, where is this house? Do you have a building or facility, or is this how is all this happening?
Well, so we finally just have our first little office.
Okay.
And that's just that really is. It's not necessarily part of our service. We do some small groups there, but everything that we've done is trying to bring it to the community because again, access is always an issue. So I would love to have this beautiful big motherhood center, and it is kind of a dream, but it's not the answer when it's so hard to get there. So when we do our groups, we do a lot of them online now, but our goal is also to have them in a bunch of different pockets all over the community. So it's not about, you know, whether I can get to it. And then also hopefully you're meeting some people closer to where you live, so you're building. There's many, and this is what's really lovely, is like, we've got families that kind of age out, but they usually stay with us to about year 2, but then they keep that friendship group and they still get together, and sometimes they still just come back. And of course, when they have baby number 2, they're very excited to come, or maybe number 3. So we've functioned for a long time until just this last year out of, you know, as an office out of my house. And everything is just we go to people. And a lot of it still is that.
How many employees, actual employees are there? You and
there's me.
Yeah.
And then we do have a very, very part-time admin assistant. And then we have a half-time, our caseworker is a half-time right now. We need to bump that up to full-time. We are, so just how, you know, parents, mothers tend to be invisible, so are donors or mothers and parents. So literally, charities, organizations that treat women and babies actually only get 1.9% of donations nationwide, and we feel that with grants too. It's really hard to get that. The very early connection, the neuroscience connection is relatively new. It's about, science is like 20 years old. They've been studying it, but as far as getting out to where funders like even know about that, the desperate need of the parent-child dyad, the caregiver-child dyad, and the impact on all that future stuff. So as we're looking at these high rates of anxiety and suicide in middle school and high school kiddos, the Z5 that I told you about that we were at, they said, even pediatricians, the pediatrician that we were speaking with out of Symphony, he says 70% of his work now is around mental health of that child. It's become the predominant issue. And same things with all these, the different people that are looking to CSA, Smart Start and stuff. The mental health of that child has really become an issue. And they're trying to get funding themselves to get earlier and earlier instead of waiting for that preschool. And we come from the place that, you know, you're the caregiver, the guardian, the birthing person, whoever is that primary caregiver is a root, and that they're the root of the tree. And if you don't have, you know, that strength in that root, that tree can only grow with so much health, you know. And so yeah, so we're coming from that bottom up versus trying to come back after we're finding an issue.
I wanted to add to what you said regarding the women of color and the high rate of traumatic experiences and death. My son is born in 1990. He's 33 years old. But leading up to his birth and at the time of his birth, there was a lot of mistakes made, which we had no clue. We didn't know there were mistakes being made by doctors. Like, couldn't tell if it was on purpose, that he didn't care, it was just whatever. But there were things that should have been done for mom that wasn't done. And at the time of birth, when we got up to the birth, instead of being head first, it was feet first, right? So the doctor was going through things to try to turn him and what have you. And she's a little lady, and the pain was, I can't even imagine. I don't know what she was feeling, but it was unreal. It was like she was screaming like someone's dying, the screaming of pain. And she kept begging for, please, you know, something to ease the pain and what have you. And this particular doctor was saying, oh, you can take it. We don't want to give you anything. And one of the nurses said, why would he do that? Why would he say that? Why? And I'm hearing the nurse saying this. Yeah, and I'm like, why is he saying this? You know, he didn't want to give her anything to eliminate the pain, which I do. We going up there, we went through classes, knew that there was something they would do in case. But he was refusing to do it no matter how much she screamed. I was like, what is going on here? And then there were some things going on inside when he was moving. I think he was trying to move him to turn the baby, and oh my God, and what she was doing, and she passed out. It was insane. one of the nurses said, forget this. She left out of the room and got another doctor and had to have another doctor, senior doctor come in. And I hear he pulled the guy to the side and I'm like, what is going on here? And he had to pull him to the side and he was like really going at him like this. And I'm like, then that doctor went out and then the new doctor came over and said, hurry up. And they started giving her the stuff that she needed and what have you. I'm like, did we just witness him tell his doctor to get out, you know? Because she was near, I guarantee she didn't have the bleeding was unreal. The amount of blood she was losing, the pain. I was like, I'm like, guys, are y'all kidding me right now? Like, you're really not going to do anything? I was saying this, and I was like, this can't be happening right in my face. But she ended up staying in the hospital for over a week because of the trauma that did to her body. And my son went through, as a baby, he was really nervous. He was really shaky like for a while. And we weren't getting any help from the doctors, like they help us understand why I was doing that. But elders from my church, the elder explained and helped her, and helped my son to get him. So when he became 2 or 3, that went away, but it was because of what she was going through that it went into him, you know. And so he was a nervous child, you know, for a while, and was really agitated a lot, and she was extremely depressed. There was no help given to her, you know, we weren't understanding what was wrong. I wouldn't understand what was wrong with her mentally, but it would obviously because of what she went through. But I was blown away at what she went through, and that I didn't realize that we should have done, you know, we could have did something further.
Well, unfortunately, back then, that's just it. I mean, same thing with even mine 18 now. Like it's still unfortunately it's even now. Like, so one of the moms that is in our community doula program, and one of the reasons doulas are becoming a really important key is that they become the patient advocate. They don't work for the hospital. And so the value of them spending some time ahead of time, they're getting them some of that knowledge that they do talk about some of the things that can come up, the more common things that they often aren't going to talk about. Now, there are some amazing OBs, and so I do not want to poo-poo them, but there are some, definitely many, that are still not very much in the old mentality. And that's a complete racist trope, and that's unfortunately still very common, even though they've heard many times that that's not true, it's ingrained. And this mom, even with the doula there, and mind you, of course, you know, when you have a long delivery, usually there's only parts of the doula is there for in person because it's so long. You know, there are humans too with families at home. So they were trying to get this mom, the hospital team, namely the doctor, was trying to get have her induced to push it along, rush it along. But this was her second baby, and she had a traumatic birth the first time, and so she was very intent on understanding what her options are. She knew she was healthy. She knew things were going out. She was listening to her body. She goes, I don't think I need it yet. I don't think I need it yet. And they just kept pushing and pushing and pushing to the point where one of the times when the doula was out, actually told her she was risking her kid's life, even though that was not remotely true. And that is a whole other ploy that can be sometimes used by physicians. And it does benefit the doctor. One, all those interventions cost money. I guarantee you every person giving birth now, whether they actually need it or not, their doctor's talking to them about an induction. And, you know, again, birth is a physiological thing. If it's a healthy birth or if it's a healthy pregnancy, it's going to happen on its own, and you could go through a lot of it on your own. You might choose to add some pain meds to it, and that's fine. There's actually a lot more options than the one that the hospitals always go to. But there are a lot more options, and again, that's another thing that you learn with the doula is that it's not only what they tell you. And that Pitocin, which induces, actually is known to cause ruptures, which is a whole other thing, the uterine rupture that leads to a lot of bleeding and often will sometimes lead to a C-section anyway. So then you have an emergency C-section and you have that recovery. So there's a lot of complications.
At midnight. We're scheduled women to come in to be induced at midnight. So the doctor can stroll in at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning to deliver the baby. I've had several friends that was exactly what they tried and trying to get them. How is that okay for a woman to go in to have an induction at midnight? How is that in her advantage at all?
And the sad part of that too is it also bypasses some really necessary or valuable pieces of because the hormonal messaging that goes between the baby and the parent to signal birth there's some beautiful things that happen there.
I was just gonna say, both of mine were C-section because they were flipped. And I can tell the difference between the first one and the second one. I was going in Wednesday morning, but Tuesday night, the first one decided it was ready. The second one was taken like a week, 10 days early. And mentally, I could tell I was not ready for it. I was not, my body, but they didn't want what happened with the first one.
Yes. And a lot of first-time parents, when they don't know how they birth, they just automatically want to induce because they want to try and control it. Now, once, if you've already had like one healthy, vaginal delivery, then they're usually a little bit less inclined. But all you have to do is be, 35 or older, and guess what? We got to talk in that introduction.
Yeah, 35 or older, 35 for the first, 37 for the second.
Away from the birthing. I can see how your group is going into the community and has the dualism and
Mental health.
group
Like,
sessions.
yeah.
And what have you. How do you get the information to that your group is there, that these resources are there, if you're not actively in that group, like Southeastern Charlotte? How do those moms know that you exist?
Well, we are definitely grassroots in that it's been a little bit of a slow process. I will say that we do get a lot of referrals to our work through mental health therapists and OBs and pediatricians now. It's taken a while to get there.
So they're giving that information.
Yeah, and they want us. Because both of our medical systems are not really keen on you referring outside their hospital system. But we do a lot of things that the hospital system just doesn't provide. So doctors are really have been really generous in starting to get a lot of that. A lot is word of mouth and friends, and that's exactly where just even us making you all aware, as a friend, as grandparent, as church member, that being someone that can make someone else aware if they've just had a baby, making sure that they're aware that we're here. If they don't need us, that's awesome. But on the back of this, we show a lot of common unknowns about mental health. And then there's a small list here that if you or your partner are experiencing some of these things, it's worth having a conversation. And that we are all coming from lived experience. So while we do work with a lot of perinatal practitioners that are kind of outside the system, a lot of them are specializing in what they are because of their lived experience. I started this out of my lived experience, and then so you're going to find that safe place to struggle and realize you're not alone. Sorry.
Online?
2 quick points. North Carolina, according to the latest information that we have available, and perhaps our speaker has better information, but North Carolina has one of the highest infant mortality rates in the country at about 6.72. There's only 10 other states that are worse than North Carolina. That's point number one. Second point is I was at a poverty simulation event earlier this week, put on by Crisis Assistance, and I learned of a program. It's a project that one of our own Rotary clubs has undertaken in Columbus, Ohio. It's called Celebrate One. Rotarians, in concert with Columbus and county officials, have undertaken efforts to get pregnant moms to doctor's appointments, prenatal, and then postpartum. They are working with them to get them the resources that they need. But it's a community-wide effort, and it's called Celebrate One.
I will definitely look into that.
Celebrate One is because that is when the occasion of the birth of the baby's first birthday happens. They have a big party celebrating that event.
Yep.
So
that's really where what we're coming to is like there's often a medical component to birthing, but it is not the whole experience. And so we really are meant to learn in a village. We're meant to, as adults, as the birthing people, meant to learn from our elders, whether that's direct parents or it's friends. We are meant to learn that way as our children. And so we are less likely to be having families near our parents than we ever used to be, because we're all moving for jobs, and it's hard to afford care. There's not a lot of easy access to help anymore. And we are more distanced than we ever used to be. So isolation is a huge problem for parents. And that certainly was my case. And that is not good for mental health at all. That's another place that our support groups is about, like finding other people to be with and not be alone. And there's always a bunch of learning in that. But it needs to be a community thing, because when those parents are taken care of, they're able to be what they need to be for that baby. And that baby can get the foundational health that it needs to keep growing from it. The medical piece is very important, that we do all the prenatal appointments and all the pediatrician appointments, but it also is very important that they feel safe with their medical practitioner. And there's not necessarily this understanding, if you really don't feel safe being honest about what you're struggling with. Like, if you don't feel you go to your one OB appointment at 6 weeks and say that you're struggling, guess what? You're not going to get access to help through the medical system. So it needs to be where community is aware enough and that we're willing to kind of step up and wrap our arms around and help people where we can. And so just knowledge is the first and most important thing.
Awesome. This is a great platform. Thank you so much. Yeah. And before we were remiss, we want to make sure. Thank you for your time. That we expect to see you in Whole Foods. We'll have you carry this day. Okay. So and then also, would you please draw the winner for our regular big old raffle? I see we have. There's no David here today.
We're ready for the winning number.
Winning number?
Last 3075. Oh, it's not me.
All right. Howard wins, Mom.
Big money, big money, big money.
So, this was really awesome, and I sincerely thank you so very much for this information that you shared with us. Very vital information. And and with that being said, we know folks got to get to their office and get back to your day. And was there anything missed before we do the 5-way test? No. Online? Okay. So we read this off together in unison. Of all the things we say, think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all?